Broadcasting from Hollywood, California, it's Grant's Rants, Hollywood Talk.
Britney Spears is a quarantine queen. Bethenny Frankel feels Housewives could be uninspiring, and Andy Cohen is apparently upset. Rihanna disrespects her fans, and we examine the rise of stan culture in pop music. That and more with Archie Lewallen right now. Let the ranting begin. I am joined by Archie Lewallen joining me over Skype. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
And we have discovered each other through gay Twitter, tweeting about our favorite pop culture queens.
Yes, I do nothing but tweet about people that have not had careers in 10 years.
I know, isn't that weird? I was thinking about that too. Talking about, obviously we're talking about Lindsay, Paris, Britney. I mean, these people who are, hot, it's been, a minute. Very few people really are talking about them the way we are, but to me, it gets me through.
Isn't it wild? I remember growing up seeing, these old 90s gays wearing, these paisley, long sleeve button-down shirts, being very loud and being very, flamboyant, and then I remember being a kid and being I don't want to be like that, and then I grew up and I'm literally that. I've literally become Jack from Will and Grace talking about Cher.
All right, let's talk about Britney. First things first, there was an article that came out, and the title was Britney Spears is pretty much the only celebrity whose coronavirus message hasn't annoyed everyone. And later they went on to slam the Free Britney movement. So I'm they have no credibility in my life whatsoever because, that's a thing. But she is very active for all purposes. She's very active on Instagram. She's thanking the health workers. She's giving some yoga tips. She's the first in my news feed, so I'm enjoying it. What about you?
I mean, I love her, truly. There's just an innocence about her that has just somehow successfully been maintained. And it's I don't know. But
she's childlike, you know?
Yeah. And I think that the general public as a whole just kind of has feels a certain level of guilt about what we all did to her as far as the paparazzi goes, as far as buying into it.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of the reason why people are not offended by her post, if that makes sense, because it's kind of we recognize that we've mentally quarantined her for her entire life.
Right. I was just talking about this with a friend today. In her life, what's the difference? She can't go on a hiking trail. I mean, she just doesn't really leave the house. She can't drive herself anywhere. So it's kind of sad in a way because there's really no difference, but she's putting her best foot forward. I mean, unlike other celebrities who are showcasing the extreme privilege they have during these times, like Ellen DeGeneres and Andy Cohen, which I find just so annoying.
Well, and I think there's also I understand that celebrities get huge mansions because they can't easily just go to Walmart at midnight just to wander, or they can't go to their local Targets whenever they feel like it. So on a level, I get that. But at the same time, I feel a lot of celebrities like Ellen DeGeneres and Andy Cohen, for example, can still freely leave those places. Whereas I feel Britney has kind of been stuck in that same place. And it's I've gone out of town multiple times just to go to a different town's Target, just for a change of scenery.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a mansion's great, but for your entire life, I know. I couldn't do it.
I actually went to the Target near her house. Not it's not it was across the street or anything, but if she were to go to one, it would be the one that I went to, just to, like you said, just to get a change of scenery. And it was beautiful. They had the parking lot had beautiful gardens. I was wow, this is really fancy. Yeah, I mean, I get that. The thing is with Britney, she is just an escape for me. I love seeing anything I could get, anytime a glimpse into that life, because it's just so secret. It's such a secret to me. But she endorsed this film, a must-see, Robert Downey Jr. What was it? Dolittle? Was that the film?
Yeah, or was it just Dolittle or was it Dr. Dolittle?
I think it's Dolittle now. I think that was like the new rebrand, like the new age version. Now, she said there was a special tone throughout the movie, and she enjoyed the costumes. And apparently, the film was very poorly reviewed. And Robert Downey Jr. said, like, listen to Britney, listen to Britney. So he's finally getting the attention that he thinks he deserved for the film.
I mean, I didn't see it, but I think every Britney stan knows that Britney just has a good secret place in her heart for just a bad British accent.
Yes.
Like, look at her admiration for Madonna.
Yeah, that's true. I love it. Yeah, well, I don't know what else to say more about Britney except I am still waiting for this Free Britney thing to come through and for them to figure out what the best solution is for her. It's still all up in the air. What do you make as a Britney fan of Free Britney?
I'm extremely torn with the Free Britney movement, and here's why. Obviously, I want her to have freedom. Total freedom, completely. But there's like, I feel like I have so many questions about it, and I don't fully grasp all the legalities of it for me to just kind of be like one of the outspoken people about it. Like, I listened to 2 different Britney podcasts, so I forget the name of it, but the Britney one that kind of started the Free Britney movement.
Britney's Grand.
And then I'm blanking on the name of this one too. The one that Mew Mew started, where they like cover Britney every year.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm kind of somewhere in the middle of both of their takes, but for me, it didn't start fully carrying true weight until her mom and her sister started liking posts about the Free Britney movement. And that was kind of like the biggest red flag for me, because I'm like, okay, is this a situation where it's like her mom and sister against the dad? Because that's kind of what it seems like to me.
I really do think it's a control thing based off of based off of the father and the management team. I mean, just following the money alone, it shows like, you know, what advantage the father has in keeping things just the way they are. And it's just, there's a lot of conflicting things. If she's not well, then she shouldn't be doing all this. I've said this a million times. She shouldn't be doing certain projects she's doing. And if she is well, then she should be able to drive herself to Target. And that's it. But yeah, I mean, as far as like those 2 podcasts go, like, I can relate more to the Britney's Graham. I did attend one rally in West Hollywood initially. The other guys who do the Britney podcast, Mew Mews, and all, they have no stance on it, which I think is really gross. Because how are you going to call yourself a fan and not have like any opinion or even view that you think something is up or question it? Anyone looking at this would question and be like, what's really going on here? This should be looked into. And that's what I called for as well. Let's have this be investigated.
My biggest thing with it too, it's kind of one of those, I feel like, okay, I have personally never heard of anyone else being under conservatorship except for her, and I think Amanda Bynes had one.
Yes, she's still currently under one.
So my thing is, it's kind of like, I feel like there's a level of, I have no doubt in my mind she has some kind of mental issues because of everything she went through, because there's no way that was not traumatic for her on some level.
Of course, yeah.
But I don't know if she has enough to justify one, because she doesn't seem like she does from where I'm sitting. But at the same time, it's kind of one of those, like, I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't know anything about her personal life either, outside of what she just shows us on Instagram. But I also kind of feel like she doesn't want to work anymore. Like, from the very beginning, she was more, I mean, she's always been an amazing singer. And I saw a really good YouTube documentary about how they kind of pushed the Britney sound on her voice, because she didn't always have that, like back in the Mickey Mouse days. Mm-hmm. And it basically like fried her vocal cords to where she couldn't perform her own songs live because it just wasn't her sound. And I think at a certain point, she was just like, I'm tired of doing this. Like, I remember she, in the early 2000s, around like the I Love Rock and Roll video, she started smoking. And she said in an interview, it was because she wanted to have a raspier voice to have like a rock sound. And I think that was her way of I think that was like her first way of rebelling against all of it. Because she was kind of like, I'm going to fry my own vocal cords so they don't make me do this anymore.
Well, we've never really heard, except for an occasional track here and there of like the lower register that she does sing in. She's always had that lower voice, like you said, like Star Search days and all that. Like we know that she could sing, but they put so many filters and so many different sounds to try to make her sound like a cat and all these things. I mean, no one has that range in real life. So like I get it. That's what makes her such a great performer, where, you know, she's making up for that with dancing. But it's almost kind of like, you know, it's sad if you really look at it as far as a career with someone who does have talent, who really isn't known for having that talent and not allowed to express that talent. It's a sticky situation. The whole thing is sad. I sometimes feel guilty, you know, being a fan, because I hate feeding into that system. But there's something about her as a person. I'm rooting for her. I just love her. As many of you know, I'm recording the Real Housewives of New York rundown here on the same feed of this podcast. But the ratings for the first episode that aired on Bravo were not very good. But later, they were actually up 13% from streaming. But this didn't stop people from being critical about the ratings and them coming in low. Bethenny Frankel said on Extra that overall the TV ratings in general have never been higher, but perhaps the Real Housewives ratings are low because they don't inspire people the way people want to be inspired currently. And she's been getting a lot of help for this, but I can't say I disagree with her.
I have two thoughts on this, and they're kind of conflicting, so bear with me for a second. So I think that the Real Housewives, from what I've seen, and granted, like I told you, I've only seen the Real Housewives of New Jersey. So I don't think it's necessarily bringing anything inspiring, but I think it is bringing a customer base that might just miss when reality shows were trash, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few of us left, and a lot of them are listeners of this podcast. I mean, we just enjoy watching messes. But maybe the majority of the audience does. I mean, people who are seeking out a show like this one, they're committed. You know, they're definitely into it. So, but the general public, maybe like they've seen the what is it, like I don't know, what's a good example? They saw the plane crash and they're driving. I don't know. I honestly have no idea what I'm saying with this, because this whole thing is so stupid. The ratings are actually up. They are up 13%. So none of this story is relevant, because why am I even discussing this? None of it's relevant. The ratings are actually up. And then some set side source, they go and they say, the quote is, "I know the ladies only wish her success more than that she had with her previous show," which is very mean-spirited, because yes, she had a daytime talk show, which I did not care for at all, but the show did not do well and had one season. Big friggin' deal. A production source said that she's pretending to be a producer, a mogul, and a philanthropist. I don't see how Bethenny is pretending to be any of those things. She has, again, I don't even like Bethenny that much, but she has money in the bank. She's doing actual work and charity work and making huge donations to people around the world for disaster relief. I mean, that sounds like a philanthropist to me. Then the source says Andy Cohen is livid. Who gives a you-know-what? This is stupid. I doubt that Andy Cohen is that livid about this. Why? Why would he be? They're supposed to be such great friends. It's just, this to me just doesn't ring true. It seems so stupid. They gave her a little bit of an FU because she blew them off. Are we even now?
I feel like it's almost hilarious that we can sit here and pretend like Andy Cohen even cares. Because, I mean, how many of these housewives have pissed him off?
Exactly.
Every day. Can you imagine how many just emails you get that are just like petty nonsense from half these women?
Not only that, like, they're getting free publicity for the show out of this for someone who's not even on it anymore. Like, isn't that worth anything to anybody anymore?
I will say this about Bethenny, though. I feel like there is a certain level of, like, I know, how do I word this? It's not necessarily like don't bite the hand that feeds you, because it's not really the hand that feeds you anymore. But at the same time, there's like Miley to this day will not talk bad about Disney Channel because they gave her her start. And she said so in interviews. She's kind of like, look, Disney paid for my house. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to sit here and knock it. Did I rebel against it a little bit? Yeah, sure. But like, it paid for my house. So it's kind of like, I feel like Bethenny is kind of overstepping a weird boundary where it's kind of like she's very arrogant if she thinks that people outside of the Bravo fan base know her as anything but a housewife. Because I feel like I can pick out names of housewives, even though I haven't seen all of them, just from different podcasts I've listened to, like yours, Out of Roll and Compliments, The Lady Gang. Like, I feel like I recognize the names. And I don't know her as anything other than a housewife and Skinny Girl Margarita. That's the only two things I know her from.
Well, I did say this on the recap. I was like, yeah, I mean, they did make you a household name, like, you know, because she said it was like getting off a stripper pole. I'm like, well, they made your household name, so I mean, you know, play nice. But you know, now
I didn't even realize she quit. Honestly,
now you've got the other side saying, "Oh, we hope she does better than her other failed project," and it's just like, ugh, like enough. So Bethenny is not on the Real Housewives of New York City season 12. Who really cares? Is it worth mudslinging about this? I could not care less. I don't miss her. If she was on it, I would probably get the same amount of enjoyment as I'm getting out of the current season. And that's it. I'm a little over it. Can I be honest? Let's take a look at some other topics, including some old Hollywood talk next.
You're listening to Grant's Rants. Subscribe and spread the word. There are a lot more rants to come. Listen anytime on all major podcasting platforms. And now, back to the show.
And we're back on the podcast. I'm talking with Archie via Skype. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
I'm not a major Rihanna fan. I loved Umbrella. There are a few things in between that I liked, but like, she's put out a lot of music. I remember she was working constantly. It was always new stuff. And now it's really slowed down. But it might be because of the research of the show or what I do in my day job, but I've been seeing so many different articles and posts wondering where her next album is, when is it coming out, what's going on with this new music. And I'm like, it never really caught my attention enough to talk about it. But now this story did. I keep seeing articles, and now she recently was on an Instagram Live, and she snapped at fans, calling them MFers, when they asked her about some new music that will be released for her 9th studio album. And she said that she's too busy saving the world. And so that's why everyone has to wait. But I mean, like, what do you expect? You're getting on Instagram Live. You're known as what? A music performer. What do you think people are going to ask? They're going to ask you about your new music. You should be glad that people even give a damn. I don't like that. That doesn't look good to me.
Here's my thing and I feel like this kind of attitude goes deep into a lot of celebrities, but Rihanna is probably like the worst one about doing this, in my opinion. So I am a fan of Rihanna. I love her. I stand like everything she does. I've been obsessed with. But okay, I fully understand and grasp the concept of a musical artist, whether it's vocal, whether it's actual instruments. I understand them wanting to produce a high quality album that lives up to where they want to be artistically. Totally makes sense to me. It also makes sense to me that something like that would take a lot of time. Mm-hmm. Great. There are so many great songwriters out there. Like, Rihanna has to have so many of those amazing singer or songwriters just throwing hits after hits at her saying, hey, record this. If Rihanna really wanted to, I don't see how she couldn't go into the studio for a week straight, throw together an album that's just nothing but radio hits, and then while she's waiting for that album after she drops that album, she can drop it, let it hit the charts, go crazy, give the fans what they want, and then in the meantime, in the background, be working on this artistic album that she really wants to perfect and craft and make a landmark in pop culture. So it's also kind of one of those, like, going back to Britney a little bit, I think a lot of major fans of Britney specifically aren't expecting new music from her. I would be shocked if we got 2 more albums out of her in my lifetime. Completely shocked.
Yeah.
But she's also not going on Instagram Live and telling us about all the songs she's working on. She hasn't been talking in interviews about this reggae album she wants to put out like Rihanna has. Like, Rihanna is teasing the album consistently. She can't really get pissed off when people are questioning it.
Exactly. I feel the same way. I mean, these are your fans. What do you think they're going to ask you about? Both Britney and Rihanna have not put out new music since 2016, so it has been a minute. But to get pissed at them is ridiculous, and just, like, they even use the word "snapped." Now, when she says she's saving the world, she has donated $6 million for COVID relief, and she is helping with local LA domestic relief. Domestic abuse, women's shelters, things like that. Those numbers are up, unfortunately, because of the conditions we're living under. So at least she is doing good things, but saving the world. I mean, okay. You just give people a timeline. That way you can shut people up. I mean, if you don't want to talk about it, then you're going to say look, there's not going to be anything until October, you guys. That's it. All right, great. I don't know. I think people just want to be acknowledged, especially as loyal fans. So I get that.
Well, and it's kind of the same with I guess Lindsay Lohan was the most major person in my head that kind of teased that before Rihanna did, just in my general world. Because I remember when she wasn't putting out music, and then Bossy she dropped as a single, and I feel like when artists, whether I know that they don't always say an album is coming, but I feel like when you drop a single, there's an unspoken promise that's hey, an album is coming. Mm-hmm. And then when that doesn't happen, it's kind of well, what's up, girl? I
don't expect anything from Lindsay. That one song, Back to Me, is out, and I think that it took us 13 years to get that song.
And it was very subpar.
Yeah, it's not a banger. It's not anything I would hear in a club. It's
fine. I haven't deleted it yet.
Yeah. I actually haven't.
I've heard better.
I haven't added it to my my playlist yet of I have this badass bitches playlist that I made on Apple Music, and it's not on there now. Xanax is on there, Bossy's on there, but it hasn't graduated to that level for me yet. I don't know. I don't consider it very badass. So
yeah, I feel especially when at the time period that Lindsay was big, when people weren't really caring about mental health back then, I feel she could have done great albums. Look at Britney in the middle of her biggest breakdown. She drops her only album that gets put in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm. The best one.
Even Lady Gaga has seriously said that Blackout inspired the Fame. So
I see that. Yeah, I totally see that.
We might have gotten Lady Gaga, but we wouldn't have. I'm not confident that we would have gotten the Lady Gaga we got had it not been for Blackout. Mm-hmm. Just the cultural impact of the Fame monster alone, we got nothing but dark pop for years. Even to now, where Billie Eilish is one of the biggest hit makers right now, and there's nothing but Exorcist music coming from her. And I say that as a compliment.
I'm not saying as a compliment. I'm I don't connect with it at all musically. I'm not intrigued.
I go back and forth. So I appreciate her lyrics. I appreciate the difference that she is bringing. And I feel there's people are too quick to compare female artists to other female artists so it's kind of I've seen a lot of articles where it's she's the new Avril Lavigne for this generation. And it's kind of well, really, if you're listening to her sound, she sounds more like Marilyn Manson or even Nirvana.
Right. That's so elementary to say she's the new Avril Lavigne because checks a box. Avril Lavigne is early 2000s pop rock. That's not the same at all.
Yeah, and it's I would love for pop rock to come back. I would love for there to be a new, just more bands like that. I want that to come back so bad.
I didn't enjoy that time period very much. I mean, the time was a great time to live in, but I just didn't love that kind of music. I just didn't love it.
Oh, I did. And I've seen some of those bands come out with more music, Simple Plan, All Time Low, Good Charlotte has come out with more music. It's not radio. It's not coming out on the radio, but then there's people Water Parks coming back. Taylor Swift's newest album, I know you're not a huge fan of her, but I am, but I get it. There's a couple of songs on there where it's kind of that's heavy pop punk influence, just the sound. I know she's not pop punk, but that sound is there. Mm-hmm.
I don't know why. Yeah, it just never clicked for me. Even the whole Ashley Simpson of it all, and it just wasn't my thing. So
I mean, obviously, Grant, you just need to hate yourself a little bit more, like I do.
I know now, but look, now I would welcome music like that. I should say I would welcome it with open arms, because what I'm getting now, I'm so disinterested in. I'm so not intrigued, and people have to lose their minds because Ariana Grande creates a music video. I mean, that's where we're at. I mean, there's not enough to go around. So those were the days where there was so much good content, and you could really pick and choose. Now you really can't pick and choose. You're given like certain like artists one at a time. They dole them out. Next 1 month is Taylor Swift. The next year it'll be Ariana. The next time it'll be currently it's Billie. I mean, if you don't like it, too bad.
I agree with that on such like a heartfelt level, because I feel like people in our age group, we were very spoiled like with new music artists. Like whenever me and you were in high school, I think we're about the same age, at least just from conversation.
Yes.
I feel like when we were in junior high and high school and middle school, we were getting like that huge boom of like all of these like actresses turned singers. And then we were getting like all of these leftover icons from the 90s, like Beyonce and Britney and Christina still coming out with music and becoming like the huge like icons they were. Cause that was kind of like I feel like that was Christina and Britney's peak at that point, or like the early mid 2000s. And then it's like, after that, we hit the 2010s, and then we get like spoiled again with like not just a ton of musicians, but like very specific types of singers. Like we got Katy Perry, we got Nicki Minaj, Gaga, Beyonce was kind of hitting her peak, and all of them had very distinct different lanes, but we still had like 10 A-list pop queens. Whereas like now it's kind of like all we're getting are like kind of like the scraps of whatever those leftover queens want to throw at us, and then Billie Eilish and Ariana, that's pretty much it.
Which I don't understand, because streaming music is at an all-time high. There's all these niche communities. I just don't know why we're being limited in this day and age when content is king and receiving like less options than ever before. Especially with record labels getting behind like one artist at a time, which drives me crazy, because like there's so many things I can stream on my phone right now. New music each week. I get a playlist of this is all new music, but like we're only hearing about like the top like 5 current active female artists.
Right. And it's like, I can't think of really mainstream female artists that are like new except for those two.
Yeah.
And it's like, I feel like a lot of people want to put Ariana in the same lane as like Demi, Selena, and Miley, but at the same time, Demi, Selena, and Miley, they were selling out stadiums before Ariana had a record label. Like they were competing with Katy Perry and Gaga. They weren't competing with this Nickelodeon girl. Mm-hmm. Like Ariana got big after. They were big then.
Well, you clearly know what you're talking about, and that's why I have you on the show, because I wanted to go into this Twitter thread that you put out there. So let's enter our Old Hollywood Talk segment.
It's Grant's Rants, Old Hollywood Talk.
Let's talk about it. This thread came out. Current stan culture would have never survived the It Girl war of the early 2000s. And this has been a thread that's been retweeted over 7,000 times. And congratulations. That's great for Twitter. And,
thank you.
So walk me through it. There's Disney stars involved, vintage Lohan. What exactly is the premise for this thread?
Okay, so before I get into the timeline, my major point with that timeline, whenever I first started it, so like, within my friend group, I'm kind of like the music know-it-all when it comes to like pop culture. So I've had this long going joke with all of my friends that have gone on road trips with me that like Aaron Carter pretty much inspired. We would have never gotten Lady Gaga had it not been for Aaron Carter.
Oh,
and like,
you gotta explain that one.
Well, I was coming at it from the butterfly effect. So like the It Girl war, let me dive into that a little bit. So like it started with the love triangle that was Hillary, Lindsay, and Aaron Carter. Then it kind of goes into, they have their tiffs, and then they kind of just bring in other people who then start feuding with each other. So Lindsay Lohan joins like the Party It Girl group, and Hillary Duff doesn't. So all of those party it girls that was like Britney, Paris, Nicole, Ashley Simpson, Jessica Simpson, and then there was a few D-listers like Kimberly Stewart. The Kardashians were in there, but no one really knew who the Kardashians were then, so I left them out of that thread.
That's fine with me.
They started infighting with each other. So like we had the Paris and Nicole war, we had the Paris versus Lindsay, we had Paris versus Haley Duff, we had Hillary versus all of them, and then at the end of it, Britney Spears comes out unscathed completely, and she drops Blackout. And because of like the club inspiration from that, Britney Spears started going to those clubs because of that girl group. Like Paris Hilton was the one taking her out to all of those clubs. She was going out with Lindsay Lohan. She was going out with actually I don't know if she went out with Jessica Simpson. I would love for that picture though to exist somewhere. And it's like that obviously inspired her sound. So for me, it was like a joke butterfly effect, because it was kind of like, okay, all of those events leading up to it led up to Britney Spears's giant 2007 infamous year that gave us Blackout, which then went on to inspire Lady Gaga. So it was like a huge joke with me and my friends that Aaron Carter inspired Lady Gaga. Obviously, I didn't want to be dragged on Twitter, so I didn't say that in the thread, but...
So if you follow like a long twisted path of feuds and female artists, I can see how you could get there.
Yeah, so I obviously changed the narrative of the butterfly effect because no one would grasp it except for my friends who are just rolling their eyes at me.
Although, if you did have a thread and it was like, Aaron Carter launched Lady Gaga, here's why, I think people would be like, what? They try to, like, obviously argue with you. But if you laid it out, I think people would be like, okay, respect.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying it on here, because I'm just kind of like, if anyone cares enough to listen to me on here that knows the thread, I feel like they'll get it. But I don't know how to articulate that on a tweet.
I want to explain this to people who are not really aware of what we mean by thread. So a friend of mine, Kat Arnett, who's a long listener of the podcast, long-time listener, love her. She said, Grant, this is like right up your alley. She added me to the thread so I could see it, which is basically a series of tweets that, like a message board, I guess. I'm trying my best to explain it, where like one leads off the next and they're in a specific type of order. So all tweets in order, accompanied by pictures. And like you mentioned, it's like a timeline of events. So you just keep scrolling down and you follow the story and you're seeing the images that back up the timeline of events that you're calling out.
Yeah. And I think that's the best way of describing it personally, honestly.
So it was like, for me, it was like reading a story, but it was like one that I had known of, but it had like these like awesome pictures from like 2006 and 2007 and, you know, just the moments. Like I have like I say it a million times, but I've got the picture of Paris, Lizzie, and Britney in the car framed in my house. Like that, how that fit into the narrative. Like, oh, you know, so this is why, yes, this totally speaks the language of me and the podcast.
Whenever I was growing up during that time frame, my holy trinity at the time was literally Ashley Simpson, Lindsay Lohan, and Hillary Duff. And all three of those women were I mean, granted, Britney has always been there, but like back then everyone loved her, so it didn't seem fair to like include her at that point.
It was a given. It was a given.
Yeah, it's like Beyonce is now. Like, duh, everyone likes Beyonce for the most part. Like, that tells me nothing about your personality.
Right.
So, but it's like you would see these girls fighting, and you could still be fans of both of them. Whereas I feel like now, with Twitter culture and Instagram culture and just stans overall, it's like your fave says something bad about another celebrity, that celebrity's dead to you. And it's kind of like, why? So I think it's just like the way we're fans and take in celebrity culture has almost to a degree killed what could have been great careers of a lot of artists, because I feel like a lot of female artists are so driven to forge their own lane, kind of like what we had in like the early 2010s, like with Gaga and Katy Perry. Like you couldn't really compare them. But when we were growing up, there were songs that Heidi Montag was releasing that were written for Britney. And it's okay. And we got both artists. We got both albums.
Mm-hmm. So this is this is relating it back to like stan culture and like these teams of people. Like now it's like you're like Team Ariana or nobody else.
Right. Or like if, God forbid, Billie Eilish does something in the lane that belongs to Ariana, people would eat her alive.
that to me, like, again, I'm like a 90s kid, so to me, like, I can't understand that. But the younger generation, younger than us, I guess they just like assign these girls to a specific sound, which is like so stupid, but like,
well, and it truly is, especially what's interesting too, it's like if you go back and look, because like I grew up in the 90s, but both of my sisters were like 6 to 8 years older than me. So I grew up with a lot of like 80s toys and a lot of like 80s knowledge of like 80s musicians too. So it's like if you look back at the last several decades, there was always like, I think like 4 or 5 pop it girls, and they all fit a certain mold. Like there was like the bad girl, there was the girl next door. So like let's take Britney for example, was the girl next door when she came out. Then the bad girl was Christina, and then there was always a token black girl, just because everyone wanted to feel a little bit less racist. So like at that time it was Beyonce, I feel like, or just Destiny's Child as a whole. Yeah. And then there's like a few others that I would have to like look at. Oh, there was like a Rebel, so like Pink at the time, and then there was another one, but I'm forgetting on it. But like even going back to like Madonna, it was like Madonna, Cyndi Lauper, Paula Abdul. Like there was always like a formula that all those pop girls kind of fit, going up until today, where it's kind of like, okay, well, I can't even name 5.
I know.
I can name Dua, Billie, and Ariana, and then they're the girls that are kind of left over from the past, like
like Taylor, Selena, Demi.
Yeah, like we can sit here and pretend like Selena. Well, I don't want to say pretend because Taylor is at the top of her game, but she's not a new artist.
No,
and we'd be like, she might be at her peak right now, but Britney was 10 years into her game when she hit her peak.
That's
so it's
true.
like,
yes.
So it's like Taylor's a household name, and that's great, but she's not a newcomer. And when we're talking about the formula for newcomers, we don't have a lot of that.
Here's the thing. My final thought on this is, I said it earlier, there's these music apps and streaming services. There are so many choices now in music and television. I just don't understand like where the mainstream music business fits into all of this. And I don't know if they know either. Because just looking at record labels and who they are releasing and when, and whose basically year it is each year, and just rotating between the same few people. There's just so at a time where there are so many choices, it seems there are so few choices in music, and specifically in like pop female artist music.
It seems like the major artist labels don't want to compete with other artists. Like even with male artists, like I'm looking at like the charts, and it's like, I can't remember the last time 2 huge male artists came out with an album on the same day. Like I can't remember the last time I saw friendly competition when it came to musicians. And it's like, why are we choosing only, like I remember when there was one day when I was in college and I got like 5 brand new albums in the same day. And they were all A-listers. Like I think like I
couldn't even imagine that.
Like that time, I mean, I'm sure they came out like a week before each other or like something like that, but they were in the same general time vicinity. Because like I remember every single Tuesday I would go to Target and buy the newest album of whatever artist I liked, and it was before you even heard the album, because it was before streaming was really a thing in America. And it was kind of like, I wish I had the picture pulled up, but like the Burlesque soundtrack I know was on there. The Nicki Minaj album came out, and I want to say Rihanna came out with one around the same time frame, and maybe Taylor that year. But there was like, I feel like we got a new album every couple years from like all of these artists. Like Rihanna was dropping one every year. Miley was dropping one every like 9 months. Like she was literally giving birth to new albums thanks to Hannah Montana.
Going back to Rihanna though, she was putting out an album each year, like you said. I mean, when you're on a world tour, you are having all these endorsements. How are you putting out a quality album that's both like good stuff, hits, and also like experimental?
It's just one of those like, I'm okay with the generic radio hits, but it's kind of like you can do both. I don't know why these artists are choosing not to.
Yeah, I mean, they did in the past. You know, just look at one of Britney's albums. You can see like Circus is a good example of that. But I thought Circus was extremely commercial in the singles they put out, but also there were other tracks on there that were like at least a little more adventurous. But that's my perception anyway. So, well, we must wrap. But I want people to be able to find you so they can find more of this stuff. Again, you clearly know what you're talking about. So where can people find you?
My handle is Dear Archie on everything. So DearArchie. And that's my handle on literally everything dating back to MySpace. So and every time a new app drops, I will sign up for it just to make sure I get that handle. So I don't use TikTok, but that's my handle on that.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're lucky to continue to grab that. I wish I could get just Grant's Rants, but it's Grant's Rants, I guess.
Well, I mean, I kind of have to be a little bit more back before. I've never met anyone else who had the name Archie, but since Riverdale dropped, I kind of have to fight for those handles. Right.
I know that, and I think there's going to be an upcoming name again because of that. I know someone that recently named their baby Archie, so yes. And that's Meghan Markle's son's name? Is that true?
No, every time you see a headline that says something about Prince Baby, that's just talking about me.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you for clarifying that. Thank you.
Anytime.
All right, kids, I love you for listening. I hope you found this to be entertaining. If you did, please give it a good rating. I noticed that there were some ratings on the podcast that other people have left that have clearly never listened to the show. I am not a screenwriter, so I'm not taking time off to write scripts. If I did, I'd like to know which ones. But I should not waste my time with such petty nonsense. But if you'd like to leave a review and you enjoyed the show, that would be wonderful. So many of you have already, and thank you for that. I noticed them. I want to shout out briefly that I've appeared on multiple shows, and I just want to promote them all in one place. I talk about organizing and working in Hollywood on the Super Organizer show with James Lott Jr. I talk about Real Housewives of New York, Scary Island, and I do a recap for Real Housewives of New York on my own show with Mixing with Monty. Is This Real Life with Mandy Slutzker? We talk about Vanderpump Rules. Best Neighbors podcast. We went city by city talking about Real Housewives. That's a good one if you want to hear my take on all of them and kind of the state of the business. And then Annabelle DeSisto, Adderall and Compliments. We kind of just bitch about everything on that show.
I love Annabelle.
Yeah. That's a good grab bag. So there's a lot if you are interested in catching up with me on any of those shows or just to even show your support behind other podcasters. It's always a good thing. My thanks to Archie. Thank you for joining us, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
This has been Grant's Rants. Support the Rants on Patreon at patreon.com/Grant's Rants. Follow Grant on Twitter and Instagram at It's Grant's Rants. Cover art created by Howie Ronay. Original theme music by Alexander Arntzen. The Grant Michael Collection.